Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel. My name is Naz.
And I'm Alba, and in this video we're going to be talking to you about why Singapore is much cheaper than people think.
We were in Singapore just a few months back and there's this preconception that Singapore is very expensive, so we put that to the test.
We actually found out that there are things that are expensive, but in general you can make it an affordable trip and you can visit Singapore on a budget. So in this video we're going to be talking to you about that, and let's get started with the reasons why Singapore is cheap.
Alright, so the first point is food. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from. If you go to Singapore or anywhere in the world, you're gonna have to eat, right? So food. Now, there's gonna be many places where food is very expensive, which makes it normal. Any city in the world, any metropolis or capital, for example, London or New York, the food is gonna be expensive. But in Singapore, there's these places called hawker centers, which are essentially markets where you can find a lot of affordable types of food. We went there a few times and we'll show you some of our clips. The food was amazing and it was much cheaper. If we were to tell you in US dollars, maybe a meal would cost us $5 US, maybe 6, maybe 7 if we wanted to pamper it up. But if you go to London to Box Park, which is these kind of markets, let's say, you would pay between $10 and $20 easily. So the point here is that in Singapore, even though it's an expensive city, overall you can find places where you can eat for much cheaper than people think.
You just need to know where to find these places. They are actually not located like far away from touristic areas. So just find hawker centers, and actually it's also a great way to try local food because you might go to a restaurant and not get the most authentic experience. So we loved doing that, and it's good for your budget. The second thing that is cheaper than we expected in Singapore is transportation. So usually when we visit big metropolis, we have to take public transportation because taxis are expensive as hell. But that was not the case in Singapore. They have these apps for you to order cars. We specifically used to mainly Grab, and it was so affordable to get around in that. So we didn't end up actually using public transportation because we could just get a car and drive across the city for $10, and between two people I think that's a very good price. 100%.
To give you some data points, because I love data. In New York City, the average kilometer in a taxi is roughly $2. In London, it's $2.50. In Singapore, it's less than $1, around 80 cents per kilometer. So you can go much further with a smaller budget. So that's just to give you an indication that yes, it's cheaper to take a bus probably, but Singapore actually has some of the cheapest taxis out of all of the tier 1 kind of cities, the expensive kind of cities.
So if you are visiting Singapore, two of the things that are the most important that you need when you're traveling is food and transportation. You already know that you can get them for cheap.
The third thing we think is quite cheap to do in Singapore, or free in this case, is just exploring in general. We're not going to compare it to other cities because every city is quite unique in this sense, but in Singapore we got to see everything we wanted to see for free. So for example, the famous, the hotel that has the highest, the second highest
Marina Bay Sands.
Yeah, that one. And the park with the trees, Gardens by Bay, and the F1 track, and this and that. Everything we wanted to see was basically for free, including going to the beach, which at the time it was free.
Yeah.
We made a bunch of videos with things to do, and you'll be able to see in those videos that everything we did was either free or super cheap. So you can definitely explore and travel Singapore for a very low budget.
And to clarify, to go to Marina Bay Sands Hotel is not free, but it's so big. I think the most beautiful part about it is to see from the outside. So what we're trying to say is that you can get to know Singapore without having to pay expensive prices to go up a building or to do touristy things, because the most beautiful thing about Singapore is the city, is walking around it and seeing it. Sometimes you go to other places and you feel like you have to do certain activities to feel like you've been to the place, but Singapore is not the case, which is why we think this is such a plus point and makes traveling Singapore actually a little less expensive. But obviously there are certain things in Singapore that are expensive, and if you are planning a trip, we're going to tell you what those things are so that you know if you want to avoid them. You definitely need to be aware of what are the things that make Singapore a little pricey.
There's three main things in our opinion. The first thing is luxury services or luxury options. Hotels can be super expensive. The one that you were mentioning, what's the name?
Marina Bay Sands.
Marina Bay Sands, the famous one. Super expensive. But if you go to restaurants in the center, if you go to bars in the center, you're always gonna pay a premium price, and it's gonna be expensive.
Yeah. The thing is, because Singapore is an affluent city and it gets affluent people as visitors, they have a lot of luxury services, but that doesn't mean that there is not cheap alternatives. So you just make sure to look for them. But the second point is hotels. Unfortunately, we did feel like accommodation was something that was a bit pricier than the countries surrounding Singapore, and that's not really something that you can avoid. But if you go to other big cities, you know, it's probably on par.
Yeah, probably. We made a video about comparing two different types of accommodation, one super cheap and one slightly more expensive in Singapore as well. So we'll leave the video in the description. Make sure to check that out. And then the third point, which I think, in my opinion, it was alcohol and drinking. So if you're a big fan of going out and you know, drinking and partying, that is going to be expensive. In
Singapore, yes. If that is what you want to do with your holiday and you are on a budget, you might want to choose a different destination, because we found that like beers were, depending whether there was happy hour or not, it could be between $10 and $20 for one beer. We saw people ordering jugs for $100, which in my opinion is like mind-blowing. So that is definitely something that is gonna make your trip more expensive if you wanna do it. But like we mentioned, there are other things that you can do for free in the city. So we do think that going to Singapore can be made budget-friendly.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of people have this kind of a bad connotation of Singapore. It's all artificial and it's too expensive and this and that, but we were there, we loved our time there, we met our friends there, we had a good time and we had fun, and we were able to see it without spending too much money. And I think if you visit, you can do it too. So hopefully in this video, we've given you a few nuggets for you to think about. And if you're visiting Singapore, you can take this advice and make your trip affordable.
But in the meantime, that's gonna be everything for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you made it this far and you enjoyed, don't forget to give the video a like. But let us know in the comments, what do you think? Do you think Singapore is overpriced, or are you thinking of going? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, because we have a lot of amazing travel content coming up and you don't want to miss it. Thank you so much for watching,
and we'll see you in our next video.